Welcome to the Common Sense CTO Podcast. My guest today is Mark Strefford, who's been working in digital transformation for many, many years, and the last decade spent working with data and AI. Now, those of you who've been following my LinkedIn content know that I'm a little bit cynical about the extent to which AI development could replace real developers, and Mark's been doing a lot of work in that space. He saw some of my content, was kind enough not to tear me to shreds online, but we did have a cup of coffee about it, and some of what he had to say I thought was worth sharing in this forum. So we're going to be going through some of that today. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
So my basic premise has been that I get a little bit frustrated when vibe coders say you can get rid of software developers altogether, because I still think a large part of software development has got nothing to do with the creation of code and everything to do with the design thinking that goes around it. I don't see any examples in those communities of people who've done enterprise scale software development, but you've come pretty close. Now, you are an experienced engineer, so you do have some of that discipline, but some of what you said to me the other day really educated me that we're probably closer to having AI agents act as software developers than perhaps I thought we were. So tell me a little bit about the work you've been doing.
I started vibe coding about 2 years ago, and back then you really needed to handhold the whichever algorithm. So back then I was using ChatGPT a lot. It would hallucinate code, it would make random changes, things you didn't ask for, and it was a big effort to deliver anything that was meaningfully meaningfully complex. But I stuck with it, and over the last 6 months, I've got to a point where software development happens almost entirely without me touching code. So I fully take your point that I do a lot of upfront work, and speccing out what I want AI to do can take a few hours, because I want to make sure that it really, it gets what I want, that it's specified, it's written down, there's acceptance criteria, the good kind of engineering disciplines that you would put in place anyway. And when I do that, I have a higher chance of success of it delivering what I want it to do. Now, my measure of success is rarely looking through the code. Like, sometimes I do, more often out of curiosity to see where it's going. But invariably, the measure of success is, does it do what I want it to do? And this last 3 to 6 months, it's really got there.
Yeah, no, you convinced me of that. I do worry about things like accountability and quality, though. If you're not looking at the code, who's accountable for? Do you remain accountable for that code? Because I have this hypothesis that if there's a problem, I still sort of can't get past this mental block that AI is still a layer of abstraction above the code. But tell me about some of that. So you don't look at the code routinely unless you've got maybe not even when you've got a problem. So what's going on in there? What's going on there? What's the whole thing about you don't even need to go to the code when there's a problem?
Yeah, so when I started coding, I learned BASIC, and then quite quickly realized that, we were talking about when we 16K, 32K of memory, even 1K of memory, you can't get a huge amount of anything in that size of memory. So I learned machine language. So I used to code games in assembler, and I did that for many years. And slowly but surely, you could then start to work with higher level languages. C became more popular, at least in my circles, and you could write in a higher level language and trust the compiler to do it. Now, you could argue a compiler is deterministic, but you're still looking at a level of abstraction over what is actually running on the box. And over time, that level of abstraction has just increased to the point now where, if I write a lot in Python, or used to write a lot in Python, AI writes in Python for me now. Anyone who writes in JavaScript, Python, C#, they pull in so many libraries that they trust are okay. And of course, they're from Microsoft. They might be from a reputable supplier, a vendor like IBM or Amazon or whoever that might be. But there is a whole bunch of open source stuff that comes in. Okay, so you've got a trust factor, right? You've got 1,000 developers, you've got 10,000, 100,000 people using it. the chances are that it's robust, it's secure, and all this. But we are to a certain extent used to that level of abstraction. Where and I fully get the challenge. AI is not deterministic, right? AI can generate, it can hallucinate, and quite ironically, this morning I probably spent about 2 or 3 hours wrestling with Claude Code to get it to do the thing I wanted it to do. And it was failing quite badly on some simple stuff. Clearing the context, refreshing prompts and things got it back on track. But it's not, it's not a solved problem. I guess my challenge comes in two ways. Is a human is still writing the spec and the acceptance criteria. And I eyeball everything that goes into live I see what it visually do what I want it to do. Can the algorithm that I've built give me the output I expect? So although I'm not looking at the code, I'm looking at almost like the business level outcomes that I want for it, and trust that the rest is in play. So it's not perfect. It goes astray at times. But from repeated use,
but do you think the benefits you get from using it outweigh the effort you had to put in this morning, for example? Is that few and far between when you've got to spend that amount of time getting it back on track?
Yeah. So I posted on Saturday. I'd spent a couple of hours on Friday specking out a change, which was fairly fundamental to a product that I've got in development, and really was core logic that I was changing. And it's complex, and we've got a lot of test cases around it and architecture documents and all this good stuff, right? I was out most of Saturday.
I saw that post. Yeah, it looks very nice.
Yeah, it built it for me. So I came home, watched the football, had a quick check, and it was built. Done.
And was it correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. You touched on something there, which is I've been wondering about. You talked about, you're getting Claude Code to write Python and JavaScript for you. But presumably when we get to the logical extreme, because I mean, these software languages, I used to be a software developer a long time ago, but the software languages are created in such a way, or designed in such a way to be human readable. They have syntax, human readable syntax, if you know what you're reading. Presumably, the evolution of software development languages is going to be that they don't need to be human readable. So they'll be leaner.
Quite possibly.
You won't have to have well-named variables. You won't have to have syntax that can be read out loud as pseudocode. I mean, because there is talk about AI generating bloaty code, but it doesn't need to be bloaty if it doesn't need to make it human readable.
No, and I think there's a bit of skepticism in this comment that if models are going to go away from a fixed monthly subscription to pay by the token, which will probably come, will come more and more anyway, certainly for heavier users. Bloated code is an advantage, right? That's a skeptical comment. I don't know if that's true. So you can constrain it. There are things you can put in place in the way you write skills files and wherever. So
you mean bloated code is a benefit for the software language vendors?
For the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI. If you could write in 10 lines of code, or you could write in 100 lines of code, there's more tokens than 100 lines of code, right? So at some point, the chances are people are going to start to put this.
But then it's counterproductive if it results in people not using it because it becomes prohibitively expensive to use it. Because that's the thing. I was talking to somebody recently who, and I did tell you this story the other day, but I was talking to somebody recently who's on a $200 a month Claude subscription, and rarely hit the limits of their subscription capacity. But there was a tool that Anthropic put out, I think, where you could model what your costs would have been if it had been on a non-subscription basis and it had been on token usage. And I mean, this is a isolated case, but they said they reckon that their prior month's usage would have been about $8,000 if they hadn't been paying subscription. And that's something that surely must be troubling for lots of people, because that would make it prohibitive for startups and smaller businesses, perhaps, to be going as fast as they want to as a startup and a smaller business.
Yeah, I see different figures, but they're all in the same ballpark. Like mine
Yeah.
is, I think the tool is called CC Glass, and it's open source. You can just download it. Mine is regularly in the $3,000 to $4,000 a month range
Right.
for the
For
same,
your $200 subscription.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it is, it is a concern. Um, I think there are a number of dynamics at play which may or may not help. So, um, will OpenAI and Anthropic go head to head in a token price war? Is one option. Right? They could equally go the other way and realize, well, if they charge in higher prices, I'll charge higher prices, and it naturally elevates up.
But
The,
arguably, if it became a price war and it was a race to the bottom, that's
yeah,
not solving the problem of the true cost of processing it, though, is it? That would only
yeah,
be a market share winning strategy. It's not really sustainable if they've gone
yeah,
for low price. At some
yeah,
point, it's going to
exactly.
have to go to
Yeah,
true cost, isn't it?
yeah. So the other options then, and we were talking about this. Yeah, many of us, myself included, are guilty of the Opus 4.8. Can you move this file from this directory to that directory? I'm equally capable of typing that command on a command line, right? It's just so there's a laziness, and there are tools out there that will also streamline your context. So if you've got a long coding session, there's a lot of output from previous commands, that log file debug that isn't necessarily needed. So there are the utilities out there that will help that, and they're probably, I don't run them really, so that doesn't factor
Yeah.
in my $3,000-$4,000 a month. The other thing, so using don't be lazy, streamline your context. Use the most appropriate model. So it's easy to default to Opus and just run that because it thinks and it codes. But it's significantly more expensive than Sonnet and Haiku, just in the Anthropic world. And I've actually by accident put a Haiku on and got pretty good responses from it now. It doesn't have the deep reasoning, but these I say cheaper, lower power models are starting to get much more capable. And then there's the whole China models, there's the open source movement. You can run, like I've got an 8 GB GPU. I don't run a huge amount on it, but it'll run OSS GPT 20B. A bit slow at times. 20 billion parameters on your device is going to get you, if you don't mind a little bit of delay now and then, it's going to get you reasonable responses for a lot of day-to-day work.
I'm running a local LLM on my machine for when I want to do stuff that I don't want to put up into the cloud, client work or whatever. And my GPU is only 8 GB as well. I use LM Studio as the actual application, and then I'm running the Qwen 332B model.
Yeah.
And I got it to do something for me the other day that I know that ChatGPT or Gemini would have done in seconds. And it churned away for about 5 or 10 minutes, but it still did a pretty good job. And I wonder, do you think in the future organizations are going to move away from cloud-based tools and start running their own dedicated hardware to process their own local large language models in work?
Yes, I think there's going to become a hybrid. So I spent some time out at Neon, and they were heavily invested in the Internet of Things, so devices across solar farms and wind farms and across desalination plants and all of this stuff. So they were capturing a huge amount of data, and one of the patterns they were heavily adopting was very edge compute. So take that to consumer devices, go back 10 years and what AI could you run on your phone? Now it'll run models, right?
Well, I have also
AI. Yeah,
tried that, Mark, and it was painfully
yeah,
slow, and it was such a
it
small
is.
model as well that it didn't do a
Yeah,
particularly good job. But that's
but
only a matter of time, isn't it?
yeah, you couldn't run voice recognition on these very well
No,
5 years ago, 10 years ago.
no,
Now
no.
it's native to a large
Yeah,
extent. I know it still
yeah.
offloads to a cloud. So I, going back to my beginnings of writing code in a small memory footprint, I think maybe I've got this skill in me to look at how I can optimize. Right? When I first, when I stepped out of that world and into enterprise development, and you end up just installing, in Node or wherever it is, you've got like 100 libraries, and you've used 50 odd gig of 50 odd meg of stuff. It's like unheard of, right? When I was developing, that was your whole, more memory than you had just on base libraries to support rendering a UI, for example. So some of the products I've built do have that tiered model architecture built into them. So, I've got a product that analyzes annual reports, and it uses Haiku to work out which pages are relevant. It's a simple classifier, but it's understanding the meaning of the page. And then I use Sonnet to get the more detailed view. If I need to do, sector analysis or over year analysis, I use Opus for that because it's much better at that reasoning. But that's baked in. So I think just throwing the biggest possible model at any problem is not. I don't think that's a long-term strategy anyway. Right?
No.
We need to start thinking better than that.
And of course, it'll become easier when the tools exist to decide which model to throw the problem at, rather than leave it to the user to decide, because it'd be too easy just not to switch models.
And there's a Japanese model / orchestrator that's come out, and I forget the name of it. It only came out, I think, last week, that promises just that. It's a small model that does reasoning across a set of bigger models, and they reckon they can get it, in benchmarks, believe them as you want, close to some of the frontier models in its performance because of that architecture. So it's an emerging space. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Mark. So there's this thing you said a little bit earlier on there about you touched on software delivery lifecycle, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember there was this thing you said to me the other day, which we didn't elaborate on because we didn't have time, but I thought, well, I'll save that for now. You said to me you've now got agents performing different roles within a software development team, all around a bespoke software delivery lifecycle created for agents.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that, because that's fascinating for me, because obviously my paradigm is traditional software delivery lifecycle and replacing activity with AI. But what you seem to have done is something a bit deeper than that.
Yeah. So the flow is not radically different from you would have in a team. So I have notionally up front a raw capture area. So in there I can capture, it could be quite a fully fledged piece of work, or it could just be an idea, and then it could be epic scale. I want to make in my one of my products, I want to rebuild this part to include these big functions, or it could just actually be like the login button needs to be red, not green, for example, right? Or it's a bug, or it's just a thought I've captured, and that has effectively a soft limit. So my life cycle, every time I add something to it, looks at it and says, okay, the limit is 20, you're over 20, it starts to nudge me to say, actually, we need to start thinking about how do we distill us or compile this down into stories that we can actually put into development. So the great thing about that is it just doesn't become a never-ending dumping zone, and I look at it in 3 months and just have no clue what any of it means. Is it important or not? So the next phase, it takes a story or a number of them and effectively creates the high-level structure. So let's give an example.
And Mark, sorry to interrupt you, but when you say it takes, have you got an agent performing a role that would be recognizable to the software development community watching this? Is it a product? Have you got sort of a product manager agent? Or you may not have gone as far as naming it, but is it an agent performing a role to look after your backlog?
So I would class it more as the activities that happen rather than necessarily. So I don't have like a scrum master and a BA, but there's at a high level you've got the take the backlog and groom it, refine it, whatever you want to call it, into things that could be put into development. Then the next step is take one of those and make it meaningful in terms of what can a development resource, whether that's a person or an AI, right, develop against. So what's the aim? What bits of code is it going to touch? What's the acceptance criteria? And I typically have those written for two audiences. So It has a English description at the top, so I can read it and understand it. And then I let Claude Code do what it needs to do underneath, as because if I just let it do that, it often talked in I don't mean a language I didn't understand, but a low level of detail. It was talking about methods and functions, and going back to the point is I don't always read the code.
Point is you don't want to be in that detail.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be like your BA and your Scrum Master understanding what your developer is going to do, right? As an example, when it's completed. There are various. I have kind of tiers of repo importance. So there's a playground stuff I dabble in and just learn. Right, basic level of governance. It creates a ticket, it builds against it, does some basic tests, all good. Then I have a top level. So tier 3 is more like strategic enterprise grade stuff that I publish out on the internet, which then pulls in. I have a senior staff engineer agent which reviews completely different context, looks at what was meant to happen, what did happen, does it agree, anything that's fallen out, any glaringly obvious problems that's delivered. It does code reviews, it does security reviews, and then and it has an independent verifier, which is just a sanity check that the ticket and the code look right, high level, which runs first. Based on the output of that gives me confidence, because there are multiple different perspectives over the same piece of code as to do I then want to, how much I personally want to sense check it afterwards. And if it's something very visual, fire up the UI and you can see it, you can try the business logic. Sometimes if it's more about data structures, I'll get it to generate that data structure from the real code on a certain set of scenarios and look at it. I'm not looking at that from a, this JSON tag's called this and it should be that. Does that data make sense for the use case that I've given it? And that's the level of rigor,
Right. And so you mentioned there, you can open up the UI and make sure it looks right.
Yeah.
I can think of many occasions over the years where something can look right, but the data behind it's wrong.
Yeah.
How do you, it sounds like I'm being really defending software developers, but how do you make sure that it doesn't just look right, but actually it's behaved correctly? Because you could coincidentally get the right answer on screen for two wrong bits of data behind the scenes. So where's the quality control in this? Because it's the software delivery lifecycle, right? So how do you test not just that the front end looks right, but that the data in the back end is right?
So it writes tests first before it writes any code. It writes tests and it proves they fail. And if they fail, then it's like, okay, good, I can now write code. So
do you check the tests?
Oh,
well, who checks the tests?
I have a senior staff engineer agent that does that.
Right.
And it's
you know where I'm going with this. We're laughing about it, but where do you draw the line? Where's the human accountability for making sure the data is correct?
Yeah. So there's levels to this, right? And me and my business and some of the clients I work with, we can capture even if we miss something and it makes it into live, it's not necessarily the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
I fully get that if you're in financial services, you're in central government dealing with benefits or tax, you're in health, right? The level of rigor is going to be above and beyond what I run, and I am absolutely I'm not
suggesting either that humans are necessarily any better at it, by the way. But there's an accountability there when a human's checked it that might not be there if there's a culture of trust in the AI to get it right.
So just
like autonomous car, when an autonomous car crashes, whose fault is it?
So what does that accountability? Now, I'm just interested in your view. What does that accountability give you in software development?
It gives you humans are probably afraid of sanctions if they're accountable for something that isn't right, so they maybe give it a little bit of an extra check over if it's something particularly impactful to get wrong. So that's what, for me it's about. I think that's probably what it is. Accountability breeds quality.
So,
and maybe an autonomous car. If an autonomous car goes under the side of a lorry because it couldn't see the side of the lorry because of the
Yeah.
reflection or whatever, which was a real
Yeah, I know it was,
real
yeah.
world case. Fast forward to when all cars are autonomous and all based on the same software and all based on the same everything, and human error is no longer a factor in an accident. How do you handle liability? What do you say to the family of the person who was killed? You know, because human beings want somebody to blame, because accidents can happen if humans do it, but accidents shouldn't happen if technology does it.
Yeah, I get that.
Is the emotive argument. And I mean, that's a real extreme case.
Yeah,
But
I know.
what happens in software when no human beings ever checked it? How, you know, who is accountable? I suppose if something goes wrong and data is breached and somebody's rights and freedoms are impacted as a consequence.
Yeah. So
that was. I'm not saying that's a reason for not doing it. By the way, I'm just trying to understand, where does the human still appear in the loop? And the example of making sure the data is right, you've told me that the checkpoints is 3 different AIs checking their own work.
yeah, so if you look at if you look at the wrangle I had with Claude this morning, right? So to put a bit of a context on this, I've over the last, I guess, 8 months or so built an economic simulator, right? And it runs pretty well heuristically. So a bunch of fairly algorithms. They're not intelligent. They just do supply and demand. If they're running low on a resource, they up the price, and couriers who just trace profit rock up with supply. Right? It's simple.
Yeah.
You can put an LLM into it, so you can connect to any of the major points in the ecosystem and get an LLM to override that heuristic capability. And had some really interesting results, which we could probably talk about at length anyway. The LLM was effectively just taking a point in time view, like what's the state of my portfolio right now. I want that to be able to say, here's a history, right? Here's time stamped, what decision I made, what the impact was, what supplies are coming to me versus, so it can start to reason, and I'm going to see how well it does it over what pricing decision should I make now. So it's more like a governor, like a monetary policy committee type thing. I've got a reasonably good view of what I want that data to be. So, and I thought I'd spec'd out with Claude well enough what it needed to develop. It hadn't done it to that extent. And it kind of flagged up because I asked it a basic question and it gave me an answer which I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So I think, as a bit of a side topic, one of the biggest skills I think we all need in today's world, irrespective of AI, really, I think just even with press and social media, right, is critical thinking. And it was that ability to look at it and say, hang on a minute, it doesn't feel right. I couldn't tangibly, it was, I described it in words, it gave me words back, right? The spec was, you could say, was maybe a little bit loose. My fault, I'll own that. That was the point at which I went deep on the problem. So context knowledge, and that's context knowledge not from looking at the code, it's from what I want it to do and what I think it should look like. That's experience, right? And I didn't know anything about economics 12 months ago. So this isn't, this is having got 10 years of it, right? This is something I've picked up from building this alongside AI. So when I say, AI can do the development, you still do need the people around it. You need to spec it up front. If you're building in a specific, business domain, either the people who are doing the spec will understand it at the end, or you have your business subject matter experts, whoever it is, they are going to look at it and what I want to avoid this sounding like is people just tick box what AI does, because I don't think that's the case either. If it's just tick boxing, you can get AI to tick box it. What you're looking at is the strategic, the core, the things that if they break, you're gonna cause a massive problem.
So are you sort of saying, I don't know if you saw the previous podcast guest, you may not have seen it, all of it anyway.
No.
It's worth a watch because we talk about AI a bit, and he talks about his experience with AI is that you take friction out of one part of the process, you have to put some friction back into another part of the process. So where you take friction away from software development, you're talking about there's still people around it. And that's what I was hoping you would say, Mark,
Yeah.
actually, when we were
Yeah.
talking the other day. It's this wholesale removal of people from software development I don't think I agree with.
No.
But it does push the activity somewhere slightly different, so you, because we were talking about it in the context of what AI does to agile software development, which is highly iterative, highly collaborative, based entirely, and if it's done well, on conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas to get the best out of AI, it would seem you have to prompt it really well from the outset. So does that shift a bit more of the onus back to bigger design up front, perhaps? I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. It's just a different paradigm, isn't it? Is there a bit of that? And then I suppose you're saying that your engineering experience is the thing that allows you to get the best out of the AI.
I think the answer to your first question is it depends. I've been in and around development teams for many years, as I know you have, and the amount of times we spec something up front that's been developed to spec and been exactly what the business wants, is rare, right? I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
And which is entirely why I've advocated for agile software development for many 20 odd years.
Yeah.
And does your use of AI break some of that, or
I don't think it does.
Is it sympathetic to it?
I think it's quite well aligned. I just think it changes probably the effort profile. So, and maybe the skills profile. So, in an agile world, and again, everyone's got their own view. So this is just my view, right? If there's an idea that we want to try something for the business, it would be prioritizing a backlog, and a limited resource of developers would pick that up and they would build it and put it back in front of the business. And at that point, the business decide that they want to continue. And if it does, then that is either iterated or there's a fresh one because it was literally just thrown together. And we all do that, right? That would become a product that was built over time in an agile way, let's say, right? Where AI has a real advantage is I don't need a limited resources of developers to build at least those early iterations, right? And you look at the success of Lovable, right? And I know that the statistics is like 1% of people who build stuff on Lovable actually put it live. It's I don't know if it's 1%, but it's incredibly low, right? And I can imagine it because having the idea and seeing it, and then oh no, what do I do next? That's a gulf, right? From step one to step two is bigger than the 0 to 1, which I think AI has compressed hugely. But if you can get AI to do more of that development resource, like the development task, and by development, I mean cut code. Let's be a bit more clear. More of the cutting code, because I'd say the point developers do more than that. If it does more of the cutting code and to the best of its ability, which does get better over time, can sanity check it so that when it comes out the other end, it's much more of a polished product. That does not preclude a person stepping in at any point and changing direction. No. So
although if the languages are no longer human readable, it might preclude them doing that. But
no, it doesn't. No,
you don't think?
Why would it? Why would it?
Well, if it's not, if software languages of the future are such that they don't need to be read by humans, how could you step in?
Because you're looking at what it's delivering, not how it's doing it.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, you would always want to do that because you've always got to check that the outputs are right, haven't you?
Okay. So I have worked at organizations where you've got developers and then you've got a test pipeline and you've got live. Mm-hmm. So they develop, they hit submit, it goes through the automated test profile and it's pushed into live. Yeah. I've also worked at places you've got, development, this test, that test, pre-prod, UAT.
Do you mean an automated test? Are you talking about an automated test pipeline? Yeah, but they have, before they press submit, they have done some testing of it.
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that we don't do that.
Yeah.
All I'm asking is who, so for me, it's a level of confidence thing. And it is easy to sit there and say, AI can't do that, or I don't trust AI to do that. My answer to that is go and try it for 3 months and come back.
No, I mean, I believe you, Mark. I believe you, Mark.
Yeah,
I do believe
it's
you, but I'm just sort of, I'm almost objection handling what
yeah,
some
no, it's
people.
cool. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, and I agree. Right, there are some developers out there. Yeah, this is one of the things that I'm quite strong on with like a perspective around AI is, if you look at the job, right, you've got the stuff, everyone's jobs are the same. You've got the stuff you love and the stuff you really bores you, right? And, for most people, it's like it's all love, and some people it's all bore. But most people have got, that bit in the middle,
Both,
haven't
yeah,
they? Yeah, 80% they is just boredom, 20% is great. Yeah, whatever the figure is. If AI can do most of that 80% for you,
yeah.
what do you do with the other 20%?
Well,
So,
yeah. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of AI for
yeah,
acceleration.
yeah,
Can I ask you about because the projects you've been working on? I know you've got some personal projects on the
yeah,
go, but you've also done some commercial work in this
yeah,
space. The thing that I wonder, does it get harder, is when you're doing your personal project,
yeah,
you're the only requirement stakeholder.
yeah.
You haven't got to negotiate with anybody for a feature. You just do the ones that you think are important.
Hmm.
So it's quite easy for you to get that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You're the only person prompting it. Well, how do you balance multiple stakeholders, competing demands in this sort of world? Now, you might say, well, you just get the same people given the same requirements and you understand the requirement and then you prompt based on the blended requirement. Is it as simple as that? What happens when it isn't quite right? And this is back to
Yeah,
your software delivery lifecycle, I think. So how
yeah.
does your software delivery lifecycle flex to account for that sort of what would previously have just been a series of conversations?
So this is not taking away the conversations with the business
Right,
at all. Um,
right.
I will say one thing though, that I did have two parts of a story that were in direct conflict with each other, and AI kind of kindly pointed that out to me, and that's just me, right? I'd written two things on two different days. I've got this brilliant idea. I've got this brilliant idea, right? And they were
And
wrong,
it
and it did
told you they're
actually.
not
And it
compatible with
told
each
me,
other.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hang
it's
on a minute,
incredible,
you
that.
want this? And to be fair, it's probably done it a couple of times. You've got this. You want to do that. This is what really is in the code. Are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
sure you want to do that? And it's that's because I've set it up that way. I talk about Claude a lot because that's the ecosystem I'm more heavily involved in. The standard Claude code planning session is not so good at that. It's good, but you need more rigor. But to answer your question, you still need people skills.
Yeah.
I've got I don't want to call it a framework because that just sounds a bit consultancy, really. I look at things that, on one layer, you've got the things that you can, I'll say, always automate, predominantly automate. Then you've got work that can be, AI can support with. So whether, it's a blend of human and AI, and whatever that blend might be. And then at the top, there's the human stuff, right?
Yeah.
And what you
And it's that
describe
it's
is,
that 80-20 thing. The
it's,
80% of software development for me has got nothing to do with writing code. I
no,
think what you're telling me is that it's only really the 20% that it's replacing. Maybe it broadens the 20 to a bigger number, but there's still all of the design thinking, all of the understanding of what it needs to do. All of those things still probably need some human involvement. But actually, you said some stuff to me the other day that made me think that it can help in some ways in some of those spaces as well, in terms of working out how to solve the problem.
yeah, it does. So I've been in the enterprise for a while, and I used to write my own code, right? I used to write games as a teenager and stuff, right? So my experience of software development is a lot of it is writing boilerplate. So if I need to write, when I've built data pipelines, I've built machine learning algorithms in the past, I've built, a UI over it. I spend most of my time building, APIs and, writing to databases and doing basic validation. Is this a number or a name kind of thing, right? I know frameworks are getting there and they do it, but a huge amount of time just goes into that. And you could argue that's where juniors cut their teeth and they understand it. And that's, again, probably a conversation, different conversation.
Well, you say it's a different conversation. I
Yeah,
will come on to that in a bit.
I know. Yeah. Later in the So if I look at what I've built over the last 8 months, there is no way I could have built that over the last 8 months because of time,
Right.
because of and I'll be open. Like I'm not naturally like a React developer, and anything I built in React was probably cut and pasted from Stack Overflow. If I enter a field that value over here, and I want this part of the screen to like, it takes me ages to work that out. Like Python backend stuff, I'm okay with. So that whole front end stuff is just gone for me.
Yeah.
And I know that's dressing.
And so you've been gracious enough there to admit there's elements of what you get in the AI to do for you that you're not an expert in.
Yeah.
So clearly it's going to accelerate that.
Yeah.
But my perception from talking to lots of people, including you, is even for very experienced, let's take React as the example. Even for very experienced React developers, it's also accelerating them. Because they just put their thought process into their tools and outcomes and really nice React front end. That's probably. I mean, everybody tells me it's never 100%. So they still need to apply some software development skill. That'll get better over time, by the way. But it's never 100%. It's like 80% right.
Yeah.
And they'll fine tune it themselves. So, do you subscribe to the camp that you still need to have some software engineering capability to get the best out of these tools? Or do you think there'll even come a time where actually prompt engineering will be the job, and it'll probably be people who would have previously been product owners or business analysts who are actually creating the software?
So most of my circle, I think, is in the tech camp. So they have, even if they've not been developers in the past, they've been in and around development teams and engineering long enough to at least have an understanding of what good looks like. I don't know these people personally, but I have seen people on YouTube and kind of watch their journey who've come from nowhere. Like they've got no technology background, and they talk about the way they've learned how to use AI, and it is just the same as picking up any other skill. So the difference is, for myself, we've grown up through the ranks of technology. We've taught that over many years of experience, painfully at times. We've had senior people help us understand this, the things we need to think about. For these people who've come to the world naive and new, right, and they've been in this world a couple of years with no technology background before, AI has taught them that.
Well, that's the thing I'm starting to realize about what you're saying, Mark. It's not that it's non-developers or non-technologists who are using these tools to create technology. It's these tools are accelerating their journey to becoming technologists. Because I've worked very successfully with software development bootcamp graduates who did a 12-week course and became software developers from never having been one before, and very quickly churn out meaningful, valuable code for clients.
Yeah.
This is actually maybe putting some of the ability to do that in people's hands without them having to go to a boot camp, as long as they learn correctly. Learning correctly is the important part, though, for me. What have you seen around things that are less visible in applications, things like security? Isn't it very easy for people to produce applications that look robust, but actually they wouldn't survive a wet day? I mean, what do you think about that? Do you have to have some knowledge of that?
Yeah, so there was a period of time where everybody's super base keys were in their React app, for example, right? Which is not
plain text,
which is not secure. Yeah, all of that stuff, right? And even now, all of the AI tools have got a habit of occasionally leaking a key into the conversation, which of course is shared between irrespective of how private OpenAI and Anthropic say things are, right? You still don't want your public
still getting processed, right? It's still processed in the cloud, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. So cycling keys becomes oh man, I've got to do that again, right? So it is getting better though. Sometimes it does it and says, I'm sorry, I've just done it. Not always.
So it knows it shouldn't.
Yeah, it still does.
But there's still an element of you need to know to ask it what not to do, because it'll still do some naughty things if you don't tell it not to.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it won't it won't straight out of the box yet guarantee that your application is secure.
No, so I think this then comes down to, what do you mean by an application? And I don't mean like, is it on the App Store? Is it,
No, I don't. I know.
what?
I mean an application, and not. I mean
Yeah,
definitely not an application on the App Store, because they're the
yeah.
things
So
I think Vibe Coding's very good at producing. I'm talking about
yeah,
enterprise systems where
yeah,
the collective capability within that I would call an application, not an
yeah,
app. For me, an
yeah,
app means something different. I mean, an application, a software
yeah,
application, is front end, back end, middleware, distributed systems, multiple stakeholders, um, multiple business processes supported in an integrated way. You finish a business process over
mm,
here, and a workflow
yeah,
means another application over here picks up the data and does something with it in a workflow. That's what I mean by
yeah,
application,
yeah,
and
yeah,
those are
yeah.
the things that have to be really secure. And
So in those
how good is
cases,
it at that, and
yeah,
how much do you have to tell it?
yeah. So in that context, you're still going to have your senior architect, whatever word that you want to put around it, but they own that end-to-end solution, and they understand that. And it might be more than one person, right? But they
Yeah,
understand the business process. They understand how that hangs together for the business. Where I think things are slowly, I won't use the word eroding, but that's probably got negative connotations. Where
evolving.
evolving is a better, I was going to say eroding, but evolving is a better choice. Yeah. Is the deeper down the stack you go, how much do you really need to know how it hangs together?
Yeah,
And I've got an example of that. So this is 2021, 2022 maybe, before LLMs would get anywhere near this kind of problem. I was working for an e-commerce company, and we were looking at replacing their warehousing and distribution courier network. So currently an in-house warehouse and an external courier, and we were going to a single provider. So we had to unpick a bunch of microservices. The development team was quite small. There was 10 people maybe. Nobody understood how it worked. It
no,
took me weeks to pick through lines of code to piece together, ordering on the website, ordering in the contact center, inventory systems, all of this stuff, right? And it was line by line. Like
yeah.
literally, I could get AI to do that now, and
Well,
it
you say
might
you
only be
could, but
eight.
you. I think when we last spoke, you actually have done that, haven't you?
I have, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
No, okay.
that was a real eye opener for me, because I
Yeah,
was saying, how do you get into code that nobody understands if it's been
mm,
created by AI? But the fact that AI can actually unpick code itself
yeah.
is an eye
I've had
opener for me.
AI. Yeah,
So I've been talking to some people lately who have a large legacy code base,
yeah,
actually a number of systems actually written in different technologies over the years,
mm,
and they will eventually become too outdated to justifiably retain.
yeah,
And there's conversation about how do they, the thing is with replatforming, it's very rarely got a solid commercial business case, because you're not
yeah.
going to have any revenue benefit from doing it.
No.
All of the benefit is in risk reduction,
Mm,
currency of code, and maybe the prevention of the odd fine here and there if you get breached because it's out of date. But there's no, it's not going to generate new revenue. And it often slips down the list of priorities when you've got a big customer win to deal with or something like that.
yeah.
What do you think about the feasibility yet of actually just pointing an AI at your entire code base for a system or application and saying to it, can you go and convert all of that like for like? No functional differences, no functional betterment or whatever. Just turn all of that into a modern technology stack using current, up-to-date supported technology, languages and components. How well equipped do you think it would be to do that today?
Okay, so out of the box, I don't think it can. There is a guy I follow on, and it's on LinkedIn, and I can't remember his name, who is doing just that, like
Right.
millions of lines of legacy code. And there was a point end of last year, I think it was. So and this is kind of my memory of his post, because he's been building in public really around it, sharing his journey. They had to build a lot of code and harnesses around AI, and I guess, force it to act in a certain way. So they would use AI to understand the code, but they had to put the structure around, understand this bit, this bit, this bit, and then build almost like a topology up. And then now we've got the individual components. Let's look at how we
Right.
build them together.
So
So
humans might have had to guide it as to how these components interrelate to one another, for example.
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And the context window back then was maybe 100k tokens or something. Yeah. He got to a point at the end of last year, early this year, where he posted saying half of what we've written we've now thrown away because AI had now got to a point where the manipulation and the constraints and the guardrails or what the process that they had to wrap around it was irrelevant. They didn't throw it all away, but they could throw a sizable amount of it away because you went from 100k tokens to 1 million tokens. And I know it can kind of degrade over, as that fills up, as your context window fills up, but it moved them further down the road faster. But he's got a very credible story about what he's doing for his clients in that very world.
I talk to clients sometimes about their AI automation of operational process and that sort of thing, and I've been convinced of that for a long time. But I am, as I say, becoming more convinced that there's more to be gained from AI in the software development arena than just AI coding assistance.
Yeah.
And that actually you've got AI team augmentation here. And
So I'm gonna push it even more than that. There were a number of occasions where AI has identified a bug I didn't even know I had. Right, and this isn't mythos level. Like this is, so my economic simulator, I was building an agent and I effectively gave OpenAI and ChatGPT and Claude the same task of building an agent that would win in a simulated economic game, right? And both of them identified a problem. OpenAI decided to build an agent that worked around it and works reasonably well, right? Claude wouldn't let it go. And I got quite irate at it, right? I was sitting there and obviously voicing it, and I'm like, say, right, just get on with it. Yeah. And then when I backed off from that, I realized I thought it was just being obstinate that, hang on a minute, Claude's having one of its moments. I realized that it had identified a problem. Now, the problem wasn't like a bug that something stopped working. This was something that over repeated events, there was, it starts off as a small, like, it was like deviation, and over time it became a bigger and bigger deviation.
Right, but that's an important point, Mark, because it's not that it was a failure of the code to execute.
No,
it just observed something in the execution of the code that it didn't think was right, and it flagged that to you. I mean, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. I mean, I could understand how AI could spot, could tell you that there's a bug where in a certain circumstance the code won't run, but to actually know enough about the problem to be able to observe that the outcome or the output wasn't correct is really quite powerful. So it's definitely team augmentation, but it's team augmentation at a senior level, really. Yeah. What about juniors then? What do you think about what, people always go, where are the seniors of tomorrow coming from if you can take away work from the juniors? Do you think it's still important for people entering this industry to learn good software development discipline before even being given the tools, perhaps? Or do you think that's just now naive?
I think the two go hand in hand.
Right.
I don't think that teaching someone how to code without being able to use AI in the process is a long-term strategy for their success, right? And that's irrespective of what happens to token prices in the future. The fact that they know how to use these tools and think alongside them, and I don't want to make them grand that AI thinks, right? Let's step back from that, that perspective. But the ability to use the tool as a critical thinking partner is a very, very powerful skill. It doesn't mean AI is right. Many times it's wrong. But like I said earlier, one of the most powerful I think there's probably two powerful skills that everybody should have. One's critical thinking, and the other is how to deal with people. Because very much, the first one AI is going to encroach on, but the second one is not really, because
no, I mean, the thing is though, I like the way ChatGPT deals with me, because it tells me I'm brilliant at everything. It's very, very agreeable. Actually,
yeah,
irritatingly so. Actually, I
yeah,
do have to tell it to be honest and critical
yeah,
quite often. But yeah,
yeah.
so okay, that's amazing, Mark. So I mean, I feel like we're maybe coming towards the end of this
Mm,
topic. I think for me, as I say, I've found it fascinating because I've been an advocate of or a believer in AI for operational automation, that sort of thing, for a long time. More cynical about AI in this context, perhaps, that it's not quite there. But actually, Mark, you've convinced me that it's much closer than I thought it was to being able to participate meaningfully in enterprise scale AI beyond just coding assistance. I've been convinced about coding assistance for a long time because
mm,
for me, somebody who hasn't written any software for um, pushing on 25 years meaningfully, I got it to do some stuff for me recently. So, but even then, I still maintain I've got some understanding of software development practice because although I don't write code, I run large teams who do. So, but I am convinced that it's closer, and you've
mm.
shown that. So I hope that comes across and people get that out of this when they watch this. Is there anywhere else you want to go before we finish that to round off that story though?
Yeah, I think that there is. At the moment, everyone's focusing about AI inside their enterprise and how they can use AI to make whether code or their operations better and more efficient. Whether they decide to or not.
I think I know where you're going because I've just remembered something we were talking about the other day. But go on.
What happens when your customers are agentic? So, and I will, there's you might say that's quite far away. My wife shops on ChatGPT now.
Right.
I bought this dress. Find me some shoes as a simple example, right?
Mm-hmm.
She found everywhere for our honeymoon on ChatGPT, and even got things that we were told by some reputable travel agents that we couldn't get. It was sold out, wasn't, couldn't do this, whatever it was like. We found it, ChatGPT pointed us at it, and we went and booked it direct. So
Right.
not only did we do it in an evening without all the back and two, we saved ourselves a chunk of commission on it, and we got exactly what we wanted directly from the suppliers, all
Yeah.
from working with ChatGPT. So it's great that everyone's asking these questions about what does the world look internally. But if my variant of open claw,
Yeah.
oh,
Well,
go on.
that's not quite where I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to go to the conversation we had about enterprises won't need to build
Oh, that one.
applications anymore. All they'll do is build APIs into the data, and
Yeah,
people can build their own
yeah,
applications to interface with
yeah,
APIs to create a user journey that works for them individually, rather than
yeah,
an enterprise having to come up with one that caters to the
yeah.
broad
That
general
too.
public.
Yeah, that too. The claw type bots, open claw, nano claw,
Mm,
they're hard to set up. They've got various levels of technical and security issues with them.
yeah.
But it won't take long until they become more mainstream. Like Apple are already talking about baking that kind of technology into the later versions of the upcoming versions of iOS.
All right,
You know,
okay.
Android will do it. These platforms, these more capable digital assistants, AI assistants, whatever you want to call it, will become more widespread. At that point, at the moment you've got we see right, LinkedIn's got its data, and this system's got its data, and Anthropic's got its data, right? Everything's kind of isolating. You've got to be in that ecosystem to access it,
Yeah.
or in that where it's going to get real value is when people open up their data and let people do exactly you said. My bot just plugs into the Uber to the airport, it books me the flight, it books me
Well,
the
this is it. Yeah,
hotel, it books me a restaurant on night one. And
it's quite a timely example because I'm trying to book a holiday at the
yeah,
minute. But if we look at that, the concept of a package
yeah,
holiday, somebody's
yeah,
packaged some stuff together to create a package
yeah,
holiday and selling it through their website.
mm,
You've just described a world where I create my own package holiday. The only difference
yeah,
being if I have a problem once I'm on the holiday, I've got different people I need to talk to about those different components. But nevertheless, I can describe exactly what I want from the perfect package, and
mm,
AI, you've said you've already done it. AI will go off and find you the accommodation that matches what you
Yeah.
want, and it'll
Yeah.
and there's a lot more accommodation available if you're willing to buy it separately from your flights than if you go to a package holiday website to buy
Yeah.
it. So I think the
Yeah.
world is changing. It's going to change the way we consume product, that's for sure.
Yeah. I know someone who bought their car. Well, AI narrowed down 50 or so cars down to a short list of 5. And I don't mean it just searched. It spoke to the dealers and negotiated prices.
Right. Okay.
So when you think about, oh, my customers are just people, like, he's on the bleeding edge, right?
How does it speak to the dealers? Does that rely on the dealers also buying into this technology?
Email, and it used the NVIDIA voice agent to do outbound calls, and it spoke to them on his behalf. And then it was only when he got it down from 50 to 5 that he got engaged in the conversation, and they negotiated 15 grand, like 10% off list price. He was buying a luxury car, right?
Yeah. Is he using tools that are readily available to consumers today?
Yeah, Nematron's publicly available on NVIDIA's website.
Right. Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
there's an episode 2 in that, Mark, somewhere.
Yeah, I need to speak to him again and
get him to come on and show us it. Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark. Look, maybe we've come to the end there. It's really fascinating. I'm very grateful to you for, first of all, not tearing me to shreds on LinkedIn when I said some stuff you didn't entirely agree with. I'm very grateful to you for that. But more grateful that you've come on here and told us a bit about it, and maybe if people people wanted to reach out to you, because you do consult on this sort of thing and provide services. LinkedIn the best place to find you, would you say?
Yeah, LinkedIn works. Yeah, okay, LinkedIn works. Yeah,
I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the description of this this podcast. So thanks, and
you're welcome. Good to join.
I'll look forward to being torn to shreds over a coffee again in the future. All right, thanks, Mark. Take care.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.